Hello, my name is Mariah Busher, and I want to talk about diversity of characters in comics and graphic novels. Comics are one of the most widely read forms of media, especially with children, so it's important that comics portray diverse people and lifestyles, especially now that teachers often use comics in the classroom and libraries are starting to cultivate larger collections of comics and graphic novels. I want to talk about first the type of research I did. Most of the research for this project came from scholarly articles found through the UB Library's databases. These articles range from transcripts of audio interviews held at panels to magazines and journal articles. The articles cover a wide variety of views on the issue, especially a diverse set of voices. There are several different racial groups, religious groups, and feminist and LGBT plus views all represented in this research. The web links provide helpful information on finding diverse comics, and they provide teaching resources for teachers and librarians to use when making projects. So the results were all very similar. Most of the research agreed that diversity has been a problem in the comic book industry in the past, and many comics still struggle with portraying diverse groups with sensitivity and authenticity. However, they also all agreed that progress has been made, especially in about the last decade. And a lot of major titles and comic companies are trying to be more inclusive with characters and provide traditional characters with more diverse sets of characters, as well as new titles with diverse characters. So most of the old representations were very stereotypical. They portrayed diverse characters in harmful, unflattering, and unrealistic ways, whereas the new ones try to provide more nuanced, complex characters and try to make them more realistic. A couple things to consider with how we view the different types of representations in comics are first how long the comic series or just the writer has been portraying this character or series of characters. Since comics come out in small parts over extended periods of time, it can sometimes take a while for a writer or series to settle in. Pumphrey talks about this in his article where he discusses the comic Ms. Marvel, which portrays a Muslim American character. He talked about how he felt originally that the comic portrayed some stereotypes of Muslims as opposed to the more realistic characters that he was looking for. But over time, the characters grew to be more realistic in how he thought they should be portrayed. Another important thing to remember is that the time period and the context the comic was written in can influence how we view it. Today, attitudes have sometimes changed towards different groups and how they're represented, and a comic that might have been revolutionary before might be seen as problematic today. So I want to talk about a few examples of characters that came up a lot in the research that I did and how differently they've been represented before and how they represent these results. So Black Panther is the first one. He's been around the longest. He's been around since the 1960s. He's portrayed as a African prince and then king who takes over his nation of Wakanda, which is a very technologically advanced nation in Africa. And for some of these reasons, it was considered revolutionary in how it portrayed Africans and African Americans. But some of the portrayals, especially of the visual content of the comic, was not considered culturally sensitive at times. The newest incarnation, however, is written and drawn by African Americans, so it has that insider's view and seems to portray the characters a little more authentically. The Ms. Marvel character, which I mentioned before, is a more minor character that is just now starring in her first solo run on the comics. She is a teenager named Kamala Khan, who is a Pakistani American girl, and she is Muslim. And all that stuff is portrayed in the comics along with her family extensively shown in the comics. And As the comic has evolved, it has gotten to be one of the most popular female-led characters and a real symbol of a great representation of Muslim Americans. And then I want to talk about a character named Wanda, which comes from Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. This was published in the 1990s, so it's much older. And this is one of the comics that time period and context are really important because this character was one of the first transgender characters to be portrayed in a comic, and especially to be portrayed in a more sensitive way. But there is some criticism of the character's portrayal today because it isn't as fully realized or as good as we would like it to be today. And Neil Gaiman would probably portray this character differently today if he had the chance to rewrite it. But it's important to remember that at the time that this was written, it was a revolutionary character, and no one was talking about these issues. And that is kind of why diversity in comics is so important, because we want to get it right, but we're never going to be able to please everyone. So it's important to at least try as hard as we can to do research on these characters when we can't provide the most authentic voice as is possible for the character. And we want to provide these diverse characters so that children and people can see themselves represented in the media that they consume, and they can also see each other and people that maybe they've never met before in the comics that they're reading. And that's really kind of the point of having a diverse collection, is to help foster all that, all of the diversity. Thank you.